If your home feels a little flat after the holidays, then plants are a great way to breathe some life back into it. But the problem is, the things that you see online and in magazines don't work in real houses, in real lighting, and in real life in general. So I'm Monica, and I'm here to show you today not the Pinterest perfect way of styling your houseplants, but what actually works in real rooms, in real lighting, and in real family routines. So as much as we all love to look at beautiful photos, the problem is it doesn't translate to everyday life. Because in everyday life, things like lighting matters, walkway matters, pets, kids, radiators, vents, doors, windows, they all matter when it comes to the use of houseplants. So instead of thinking, I want to recreate this photo and how do I take this photo and have this in my house, take a moment and think about what appeals to you about that photo. Is it the multiple textures that the plants bring into the space? Is it the architecture of the plants? Is it the coziness? What is it about that photo that draws your attention and makes you want to be a part of that picture? And try to recreate that feeling in your own home. The other thing that you want to think about is architectural plants versus what I call lush plants. And it's the same thing that you would think about in your garden. There are certain plants that have a really strong shape and structure. Those are your architectural plants. So things like sansevieria or your snake plants, cactus, aloes, euphorbia, agave. They all have very strong architectural structures that add a very strong vertical feel and shape into your space. The thing is, those tend to need a lot of bright light. So you also want to think through your lighting sources. Obviously, windows are a great lighting source, but we don't live in greenhouses. So you also want to think through what kind of other lighting you have available. Now, most of us don't love to have a lot of grow lights around. I particularly don't love that look. It can lead to a lot of chaos, a lot of feeling of clutter. There's wires all around. And while I do have grow lights on some of my plants, I choose not to have them on the majority of my plants. But you want to think through what the light source is. I have found that your regular LED lights work wonderfully. So a lot of times I try to position a plant under a regular LED light or near an LED light, and I just tend to have those lights on for a little bit longer than I normally would. And I really haven't noticed much of a difference in my electric bill, although I do also live with a small child and I do find myself walking around the house oftentimes turning things off after him. Architectural plants are great for corners or near sofas or near large pieces of furniture. They really serve to anchor a room and not disappear into it. Your lush plants are a lot softer. They come in a lot of different textures and they really add some movement into the space. Think of trailing vines or think of things like ferns that add a lot of fullness into the space. So here you want to look for things like pothos or ivy, a lot of different types of philodendrons or peperomia. And they can be a lot more forgiving in terms of their lighting need. Now that doesn't mean that they can live in very, very dark spaces, but it does mean that they are a little bit more forgiving than something like a cactus. So now that you've thought through the architecture of a plant and the lighting that you're going to give that plant, the next thing that you want to think through is how you're going to intentionally place that plant. So a couple of things that you want to take into consideration here. There have been times where I've put plants in places that are just not practical. For example, one of my husband's biggest complaints was that I would put plants all around the fireplace. And while it looked really, really nice, when we went to actually go light a fire, it would take us 10 minutes just to clear everything off the fireplace, find a different spot for it, and then that other spot looked very, very cluttered. And then once the fire was done, move everything back to its original spot. So just make things simple. Make sure that it's practical where you're putting your plant. If you know that somebody is going to often want to sit on the couch, don't put a very large plant with the leaves draping over the sides of the couch because that person may not want a leaf touching his or her head. Or don't put it near a walkway where you'd have to walk your skinny walk and kind of kind of scoot your way around the walkway because there's a giant plant impeding the foot traffic that's flowing through your house. So these are some of the things that you want to think through. The other thing that you want to take into consideration is not just clumping plants together into groups, because that can also look like a lot of chaos. When I group my plants together, I try to group them in threes. That seems to be the right size for me. And I try to clump them in terms of, one really strong architectural plant versus one of the more lush trailing plants versus something that kind of lends itself to halfway between either one of those, just to make the grouping interesting. Now, containers are a great way to showcase your style and personality. So the container that you keep your plant in really should lend itself to the aesthetic of your home. So if you have a lot of black and white in your home, try to mimic that in your containers as well. Containers come in a variety of different formats. They come in wood tones, metal finishes, terracotta, ceramic, you name it. And the other thing is, it's not just limited to actual cash pose or plant pot containers that are sold that way. You can be a little bit creative and think outside the box in terms of what you find and what you can use. Because I've used things such as soup tureens or vintage bowls or other items such as pitchers. Whatever really can hold a plant can be a planter. Just use your imagination. The idea here is really to showcase your personality and not going for perfection. And lastly, move your plants around. I am constantly moving my plants for a couple of reasons. One, I do like to move them outside for the summer months because they do benefit greatly from being outside. But also, once they are inside, I am constantly moving them around, chasing the light source as the light changes with the different seasons. But also, it just helps make the space feel different every time I move plants around. Sometimes I have a lot of plants in a space. Sometimes I really minimize the amount of plants that I have. It can be a great way to freshen or change up the look of the space, and you wouldn't necessarily think of it. Now, houseplants are a little bit interesting. They were huge in the 70s in terms of styling your house. Think of like the Mad Men era. You always saw houseplants in people's houses. And then they kind of went away and became a little bit more quiet. And then they started booming again during the COVID timeframe. So that's really when social media and all these other aspects of our current modern day life have really brought houseplants back into our homes and our lifestyle. I actually remember during the year of COVID how out of control expensive houseplants got. Now, the prices have come back down, but houseplants are still very much in style and a great way to help style your home. So just remember, your home or your garden or you should never be a replica of what you see online or in magazines. Houseplants specifically should help your space feel more inviting and calm rather than complete chaos. I hope you guys enjoyed today's video. If you did, please make sure to like and subscribe. Send to anybody else that you may think would enjoy it. And stick around and check out some of these playlists that I also have about other houseplants.